This car is discontinued. It's not available new anymore. It has been discontinued for almost 3 years now. So that's insane to think about. It's an aging car. Stuff will fail. Electronics will fail.
Electric cars have been hailed as the future of transportation, with promises of zero emissions, cutting-edge technology, and smooth driving experiences. But while some EVs have become icons of progress, others ended up as cautionary tales, forgotten, abandoned, or ridiculed for their failures. For every Tesla that captured the imagination of drivers, there's an EV that fizzled out before it could even make a dent in the market. From ambitious startups that collapsed under the weight of their own hype to major automakers that completely misjudged consumer demand. These disasters reveal just how rocky the road to electrification has been. Some were plagued by terrible designs, others by weak performance, sky-high prices, or company scandals, and a few never stood a chance in the first place. These are the 12 EVs that promised the world, but ended up as disasters that most people don't even talk about today. Number 12. GME V1. When people talk about the first serious attempt at a modern electric car, the GME V1 is always at the top of the list. Launched in the mid-1990s, the EV1 wasn't some backyard experiment or a compliance-only vehicle. It was a sleek, futuristic coupe that promised to bring electric mobility to mainstream drivers. Built by General Motors and leased in select markets like California and Arizona, the EV1 showed the world that big automakers were capable of building real EVs. But the story of the EV1 is less about what it achieved and more about how it ended. At the time, California had implemented zero-emission mandates, pushing automakers to experiment with electric vehicles. The EV1 was GM's answer to those regulations. It had a range of about 70 to 100 miles, depending on the battery version, which was impressive for the time, and it delivered instant torque that wowed drivers. The people who leased the EV1 loved it, often describing it as ahead of its time. The problem wasn't consumer reception, it was the automaker itself. GM claimed that building and maintaining the EV1 was too expensive. Instead of selling the cars, they forced lessees to return them. Then, in one of the most controversial moves in automotive history, GM recalled and crushed nearly all of them. This decision sparked outrage among EV enthusiasts and even inspired the 2006 documentary Who Killed the Electric Car? The EV1's failure wasn't because it was a bad car, it was because of corporate politics, oil industry pressure, and a lack of vision from GM. The company chose short-term savings over long-term innovation, effectively killing what could have been a head start in the EV revolution. For decades, the EV1 became a symbol of lost opportunity, proof that the auto industry wasn't ready to embrace the future. Today, only a handful of EV1s exist in museums, stripped of their batteries, as silent reminders of what could have been. GM went from pioneering the space to lagging behind as other companies took the EV lead. The EV1 is remembered less as a technological failure and more as a corporate disaster. One of the greatest automotive tragedies nobody can forget. Number 11. Fisker Karma. In the early 2010s, the Fisker Karma was supposed to redefine what a luxury electric car could be. With sleek, exotic styling that looked like it belonged on a concept car stage, the Karma turned heads everywhere it went. Henrik Fisker, the designer behind cars like the Aston Martin DB9 and BMW Z8, promised to deliver not just an EV, but a rolling work of art that fused elegance with cutting-edge technology. On the surface, It seemed like a sure win. But under the hood, or in this case under the floor, things quickly went wrong. The Fisker Karma wasn't a pure EV like Tesla's Roadster at the time. Instead, it used a plug-in hybrid setup with a small battery pack that powered 2 electric motors and a gasoline engine that worked more like a generator. The car could drive about 30 miles on electric power alone before the engine kicked in. For a vehicle that cost over $100,000, this limited range left buyers unimpressed compared to the growing competition. Then came the reliability issues. The Karma was notorious for breaking down, even when brand new. Some cars died completely on delivery, while others faced repeated electrical glitches. Even worse, the batteries, supplied by a company called A123 Systems, had major defects. Several cars actually caught fire, making headlines for all the wrong reasons. Production delays only added to the disaster. Fisker struggled to get the Karma built on schedule, and when cars did arrive, they were plagued with problems that made early buyers feel like beta testers. By 2013, the company had filed for bankruptcy, despite raising over $1 billion in funding. Its assets were eventually bought by a Chinese firm, which relaunched under the name Karma Automotive. But the damage was already done. The Fisker Karma stands as a reminder that design alone can't save a car. It looked beautiful, but beauty doesn't mean much when owners are stranded on the side of the road. In contrast, Tesla was building momentum at the same time with the Model S, which offered better range, reliability, and performance, stealing the spotlight that Fisker had hoped to claim. Today, the Fisker Karma is remembered less as a luxury innovation and more as a failed dream. It promised to be the future of green luxury driving, but instead, it burned out spectacularly, becoming one of the most infamous EV flops in history. Number 10. Coda Sedan. If there's one electric car that perfectly illustrates the phrase "forgettable disaster," it's the Coda Sedan. Launched in 2012 by Coda Automotive, this California-based startup claimed it was going to compete with Nissan's Leaf and Tesla's early models. Instead, the Coda became a running joke in the EV world, failing in almost every category that mattered. First impressions were already a problem. The Coda Sedan was based on a cheap Chinese compact car, the Hefei Saibao, which was itself a knockoff of a 1990s Mitsubishi design. Coda slapped in an electric drivetrain and tried to market it as a new, modern EV. The result looked outdated the moment it rolled into showrooms. While the Leaf and Model S had futuristic styling, the Coda looked like it belonged in a rental fleet from a decade earlier. Then came the price. Coda wanted around $37,000 for this plain-looking sedan, almost $10,000 more than a Nissan Leaf, which was far more refined. For that money, buyers got a car with a driving range of about 88 miles, slightly better than the Leaf, but nowhere near enough to justify the higher cost or the bland looks. The real disaster was quality. Reviews were brutal. The interior felt cheap, with hard plastics and poor fit and finish. The ride was noisy, the handling uninspired, and the car lacked basic features that competitors offered. Worse, reliability was almost non-existent. Reports of electrical issues, faulty battery packs, and breakdowns piled up quickly, leaving early adopters frustrated. Coda also made the classic mistake of poor marketing. Very few people even knew the brand existed, and those who did weren't impressed. Sales numbers were abysmal. Fewer than 150 units were ever sold in total. Within a year, Coda filed for bankruptcy, making it one of the fastest EV failures in history. What makes the Coda Sedan so notorious isn't just how bad it was, it's how completely irrelevant it became. Unlike the GM EV1, which had enthusiasts fighting to keep it alive, nobody shed a tear when Coda disappeared. It was a half-baked attempt to cash in on the EV trend without offering anything meaningful to buyers. Today, spotting a Coda Sedan on the road is nearly impossible. Most were scrapped or abandoned, and the company is little more than a footnote in EV history. If the GM EV1 was a tragedy and the Fisker Karma was a disappointment, the Coda Sedan was pure embarrassment. A car so bland and broken that it's been almost completely forgotten. Number 9. Aptera Type 1. Few EVs were as futuristic, or as strange, as the Aptera Type 1. Launched by a California startup in the mid-2000s, the Aptera looked less like a car and more like something out of a science fiction movie. With its three-wheel design, teardrop shape, and ultra-lightweight body, the Type 1 promised revolutionary efficiency. The company claimed it could achieve the equivalent of over 200 miles per gallon, making it one of the most energy-efficient vehicles ever conceived. The idea was bold, but reality proved much harsher. The first problem was the design itself. While aerodynamic and efficient, the Aptera looked too weird for mainstream buyers. With its narrow stance, bubble-like cockpit, and three wheels, many people weren't even sure if it qualified as a car or a motorcycle. That uncertainty created regulatory headaches, with different states classifying it differently, making it harder to market nationwide. Then came the money issues. Aptera burned through tens of millions in funding while struggling to turn its prototype into a production-ready vehicle. Delays piled up, and investor confidence began to waver. The company's focus kept shifting too. At one point, it announced it would abandon its original design in favor of a more conventional four-wheel electric sedan. That move alienated fans who had supported the Type 1 for its uniqueness in the first place. Consumer interest also didn't match the hype. While tech enthusiasts were intrigued, average buyers weren't ready to shell out tens of thousands for a three-wheeled oddity that offered little practicality beyond efficiency. Families couldn't fit inside, storage was minimal, and safety ratings were questionable. In short, it was a niche vehicle with almost no real market. By 2011, Aptera had run out of cash and shut down before delivering a single production Type 1 to customers. Investors walked away, and the car became yet another cautionary tale of how ambition doesn't always translate into success. The company was later revived under new management and is once again promising futuristic EVs. But the Type 1's legacy remains tied to its spectacular collapse. The Aptera Type 1 is remembered today as the EV that looked like it belonged on a movie set but never made it to the streets. It symbolized the excitement and naivety of the early EV boom, when startups believed futuristic designs and bold claims could overcome the harsh realities of the automotive market. Instead, it became yet another forgotten disaster that promised too much and delivered nothing. Number 8. Mitsubishi i-MiEV. When the Mitsubishi i-MiEV hit the US market in 2011, it was supposed to be one of the first mass-market electric cars available to regular buyers. On paper, it seemed like a milestone, an affordable EV from a major automaker priced under $30,000 before tax incentives. But in reality, the i-MiEV turned out to be one of the most embarrassing flops in the modern EV era. The first issue was the design. The i-MiEV looked more like a tiny jelly bean than a car. Based on a Japanese K-car platform, it was extremely narrow, short, and tall, giving it awkward proportions that American buyers hated. It looked like a golf cart trying too hard to pass as a car. While European and Japanese city drivers might tolerate quirky styling, U.S. customers overwhelmingly wanted their vehicles to look at least somewhat normal, and the i-MiEV failed miserably in that department. Then came the performance. The i-MiEV's range was just 62 miles on a full charge, far less than the Nissan Leaf's 73-mile range at the time, and nowhere close to Tesla's offerings. The car was painfully slow, with just 66 horsepower, taking nearly 15 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour. On highways, it felt underpowered and unstable, and many reviewers said it was outright dangerous in heavy traffic. The interior was equally disappointing. Cheap plastics, cramped seating, and a lack of features made the car feel bargain bin despite its price tag. Mitsubishi pitched it as an affordable green solution, but buyers couldn't ignore the fact that for just a little more money, they could get a Leaf, which offered better looks, more comfort, and superior performance. Sales numbers reflected this disaster. In the U.S., the i-MiEV barely moved off dealer lots. By 2017, Mitsubishi pulled it from the American market after selling fewer than 2,000 units in total. Even globally, where it had some initial traction in niche markets, it quickly faded as competitors released better options. The i-MiEV's failure came down to a simple truth. It was too small, too ugly, too underpowered, and too overpriced for the American market. Mitsubishi may have been early to the EV game, but instead of being remembered as a pioneer, the i-MiEV is remembered as a punchline, a car that proved how badly automakers could misjudge what EV buyers actually wanted. Number 7. Faraday Future FF91. If there's one EV that perfectly represents hype gone wrong, it's the Faraday Future FF91. Unveiled in 2017 with flashy presentations and wild promises, the FF91 was billed as a Tesla killer. The company, backed by Chinese billionaire Jia Yueting, claimed it would revolutionize the electric car industry with performance, luxury, and technology that left competitors in the dust. On stage, Faraday Future promised a futuristic SUV that could go 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds, travel over 370 miles on a single charge, and even park itself without a driver. It all sounded too good to be true. And it was. The problem started almost immediately. At its big unveiling event, the self-parking demo failed live on stage, embarrassing the company in front of the world. Critics quickly began to question whether Faraday Future had overpromised and under-delivered. Those doubts only grew when financial troubles surfaced. The company was burning through cash at an alarming rate, reportedly spending billions without delivering a single production car. Investors grew wary, suppliers stopped getting paid, and lawsuits piled up. Employees began leaving in waves, and rumors spread that the company was nothing more than a house of cards built on exaggerated promises. Production of the FF91 was delayed over and over again, with new dates announced but never met. At one point, the company even suspended construction of its Nevada factory, which had been touted as a key step in bringing the car to life. Even when Faraday Future showed off working prototypes, the numbers didn't add up. The car was massive, heavy, and overly complex, packed with technology that seemed more like vaporware than real innovation. By the time Tesla, Lucid, and other competitors rolled out their own high-performance EVs, Faraday's claims no longer looked impressive. They looked outdated. Years later, Faraday Future still insists the FF91 is coming, but production has remained extremely limited and riddled with controversy. Few cars have actually reached customers, and those that did were plagued with reliability concerns and unfinished software. The FF91 has become a symbol of EV overhype, a company that promised the moon but couldn't even deliver a decent launch event. While the name Faraday Future sounded like a vision of progress, it's now shorthand for broken promises and wasted billions. In the end, the FF91 wasn't a Tesla killer, it was its own worst enemy. Number 6. BMW i3. When BMW unveiled the i3 in 2013, it was clear the German automaker wanted to make a statement. This wasn't just another compliance EV, it was a bold experiment in sustainable design. With its futuristic looks, carbon fiber reinforced body, and quirky interior made from recycled materials, the i3 was meant to showcase BMW's forward-thinking vision for the electric future. But instead of becoming a trendsetter, it quickly became one of the strangest flops in the EV market. The biggest problem was its appearance. The i3's tall, boxy design with odd proportions and unusual rear doors turned off a lot of traditional BMW buyers. People used to sleek 3 Series sedans or aggressive M models were confused by a city car that looked more like a futuristic toaster on wheels. Even EV enthusiasts found its styling polarizing. Some called it innovative, while others thought it was flat-out ugly. Then there was the range. Early versions of the i3 offered just 81 miles per charge, which was quickly outclassed by competitors like the Nissan Leaf and Tesla Model S. While BMW eventually improved the range to over 150 miles, with later battery updates, the car always felt a step behind in terms of practicality. For a vehicle priced above $40,000, buyers expected more than limited range and cramped seating. Performance didn't help its case either. While the i3 was quick in city traffic thanks to its instant torque, it struggled on highways, where its light frame and narrow tires made it feel unstable at higher speeds. The optional range extender, a tiny gasoline engine acting as a generator, was meant to ease range anxiety, but it only added complexity and noise to an already niche product. Sales never took off the way BMW hoped. Despite heavy marketing, the i3 failed to capture mainstream buyers in the US, where people favored larger vehicles with longer ranges. It sold better in Europe, but even there, it was quickly overshadowed by newer, cheaper, and more capable EVs. By 2021, BMW officially discontinued the i3 in most markets, quietly moving on to more conventional EVs like the i4 and iX. The i3 is remembered today as a brave experiment that was too quirky, too limited, and too expensive to succeed. While it did push the industry forward in terms of lightweight construction and sustainable materials, it never resonated with buyers. Instead of being the future of BMW, the i3 became a symbol of how even the biggest automakers can miss the mark when trying to reinvent the car. Number 5. Chevy Spark EV. The Chevy Spark EV is one of those cars that most people either never heard of or quickly forgot about. Released in 2013, It was General Motors' attempt to dip a toe into the EV market after the controversial death of the EV1. On paper, it sounded like a fun little city car. Compact, affordable, and surprisingly quick off the line thanks to its instant electric torque. But in reality, the Spark EV turned out to be more of a compliance car than a serious entry into the growing EV segment. The first red flag was availability. GM only sold the Spark EV in limited states like California, Oregon, and later Maryland, markets where strict emissions regulations forced automakers to offer electric options. That meant most Americans never even had the chance to buy one. And for those who could, the Spark EV didn't exactly inspire confidence as a long-term vehicle. Its range was the biggest drawback. With just 82 miles per charge, the Spark EV couldn't compete with cars like the Nissan Leaf, which offered more practicality for a similar price. For city commuting, it was fine, but any attempt at longer trips quickly turned into a stressful experience. Charging wasn't much better either, as fast charging options were limited, and home charging times were painfully slow with standard equipment. Then there was the car itself. Based on the regular gasoline-powered Chevy Spark, the EV version inherited the same cramped interior, cheap plastics, and basic design. It didn't feel like a futuristic electric car. It felt like a budget hatchback with a battery stuffed inside. While owners praised its zippy acceleration, they couldn't ignore its noisy cabin, uncomfortable seating, and bare-bones features. GM also treated the Spark EV like an afterthought. Marketing was almost non-existent. Dealerships didn't push it, and production numbers were tiny. By the time buyers even learned it existed, it was already being phased out. In 2016, the Spark EV was quietly discontinued, replaced by the more capable Chevy Bolt EV, which offered far better range and usability. The Spark EV wasn't a complete disaster. It had fans who loved its quirky charm and instant torque. But as a product, it failed to matter. It was a car built not because GM wanted to lead the EV revolution, but because it had to meet regulations, and that lack of commitment showed. Today, it's remembered as a forgettable stopgap in GM's electric history, overshadowed by both its troubled past and the more serious efforts that came after. Number 4. Lucid Air. When the Lucid Air was first revealed, it was hailed as a true Tesla rival. With its stunning design, futuristic technology, and record-breaking range of over 500 miles on a single charge, the Air promised to redefine luxury EVs. Lucid marketed it as the electric equivalent of a Mercedes S-Class, offering not just performance, but also refinement and prestige. On paper, it had everything: world-class aerodynamics, lightning-fast acceleration, and a luxurious cabin filled with screens and cutting-edge features. But as the years rolled on, the Lucid Air became less of a game-changer and more of a cautionary tale about overhyped EV startups. The first major issue was production. Lucid struggled to ramp up manufacturing, with delays plaguing nearly every promised delivery timeline. Customers who placed reservations waited years for their cars, and many walked away frustrated. By the time the Air finally reached buyers in 2021, Tesla, Mercedes, and even newcomers like Rivian had already stolen much of the spotlight. Then came the price problem. While Lucid initially promised versions of the Air starting around $60,000, most models that actually reached the market were priced well above $100,000. That pushed it out of reach for mainstream EV buyers, and into a hyper-competitive luxury segment dominated by brands with decades of loyal customers. For a startup with no history, convincing people to spend six figures on an unproven car was always going to be a tough sell. Quality issues didn't help either. Early customers reported software glitches, malfunctioning screens, and reliability problems. The flashy tech that was supposed to make the Air feel futuristic often turned into a source of frustration. And while the car's range was indeed impressive, it wasn't enough to offset the headaches that came with ownership. Financial troubles soon followed. Lucid burned through billions in funding while delivering far fewer cars than expected. Investors grew skeptical, stock prices plummeted, and questions mounted about whether the company could even survive long enough to fulfill its ambitious plans. The Lucid Air isn't a disaster because it's a bad car. It's actually an engineering marvel in many respects. But the business behind it has stumbled badly. Between production delays, sky-high prices, and ongoing financial uncertainty, the Air has become a symbol of how difficult it is for startups to scale in the automotive industry. Instead of being remembered as the Tesla killer, it may go down as a warning that even the most advanced EV can fail if the company behind it can't deliver. Number 3. Lordstown Endurance. When Lordstown Motors announced the Endurance electric pickup in 2020, it seemed like perfect timing. The EV market was heating up. Trucks were the most popular vehicles in America, and Tesla's Cybertruck had shown there was massive interest in electric pickups. Lordstown promised something different: a rugged, no-nonsense work truck designed for fleets and contractors. With its bold marketing and patriotic branding tied to reviving an old GM plant in Ohio, the Endurance captured attention as the truck that would bring American manufacturing jobs back. But it didn't take long for that dream to unravel. The Endurance was supposed to be innovative, using 4 in-wheel hub motors instead of a traditional drivetrain. This design promised better traction, fewer moving parts, and impressive performance. On paper, it sounded revolutionary. In reality, the technology proved extremely difficult to engineer and expensive to produce. Questions quickly arose about whether the system could handle real-world durability, exactly the kind of reliability truck buyers demand. Then came the financial chaos. Lordstown hyped up pre-order numbers, claiming over 100,000 reservations from eager customers. Later investigations revealed that many of those orders were non-binding expressions of interest from small companies, not actual commitments. Investors accused the company of misleading the public, and lawsuits soon followed. Leadership scandals made things worse, with executives resigning under pressure as the company's credibility collapsed. Meanwhile, delays kept piling up. Production targets slipped again and again, and when a handful of trucks finally reached customers in late 2022, they were plagued by recalls and reliability issues. The Endurance couldn't compete with heavy hitters like the Ford F-150 Lightning or Rivian R1T, both of which launched stronger, faster, and with actual production numbers to back them up. By mid-2023, Lordstown Motors filed for bankruptcy, confirming what many critics suspected all along: that the Endurance was never going to make it. The company blamed its failure partly on disputes with its key investor, Foxconn. But the reality was clear. The business model wasn't sustainable, and the truck wasn't ready. The Lordstown Endurance now stands as one of the most infamous EV startup flops in recent memory. It had the right idea, an affordable work truck for fleets, but it couldn't execute. Instead of reviving American manufacturing, it became a cautionary tale about overpromising, mismanagement, and the brutal realities of the auto industry. Number 2. Bollinger B1. The Bollinger B1 was supposed to be the Land Rover Defender of the EV world. Rugged, boxy, and unapologetically utilitarian. Unveiled in 2017 by Michigan-based startup Bollinger Motors, the B1 promised to be the ultimate electric off-roader. With its squared-off design, removable panels, massive ground clearance, and clever features like a pass-through cargo tunnel running the length of the vehicle, it quickly attracted attention from enthusiasts who wanted an EV that wasn't just another sleek city car. For a moment, it seemed like Bollinger had found its niche, but excitement quickly turned into disappointment. The first problem was the price. Initially teased at around $60,000, the B1's price eventually ballooned to well over $125,000. That instantly pushed it out of reach for the adventurous, blue-collar buyers it was originally marketed toward. At that price, it wasn't competing with Jeeps or Defenders. It was up against luxury SUVs and trucks from established automakers, which offered far more comfort, performance, and reliability. Then came the production problem. Bollinger never actually managed to mass-produce the B1. Despite years of promises, prototypes, and flashy demonstrations, the company continually delayed launch dates. In 2022, Bollinger announced it was indefinitely postponing the B1 and its pickup variant, the B2, citing the high costs of bringing such vehicles to market. Instead, the company shifted focus to commercial EVs, delivery vans, and chassis platforms, leaving early fans frustrated and betrayed. Another issue was practicality. While the B1 looked tough, reviewers who tested prototypes noted that it drove more like a heavy science project than a refined vehicle. Its bare-bones interior lacked the comfort and polish buyers expect at six-figure prices. And while its 200-mile range was decent for an off-roader, it paled in comparison to newer EVs hitting the market at the time. The final nail in the coffin was competition. Rivian launched its R1T and R1S with real off-road capability, luxury interiors, and cutting-edge technology, all while actually delivering vehicles to customers. Ford entered the scene with the F-150 Lightning, offering practicality and trust in a nameplate buyers knew. Next to those heavyweights, Bollinger never stood a chance. Today, the Bollinger B1 is remembered as an ambitious but unrealistic project. A cool idea that never made it past the prototype stage. It promised a revolution for off-road EVs, but ended up as yet another failed startup, proving that clever design alone isn't enough in the brutally competitive auto industry.